Hello, everyone. Great to see this wonderful crowd of the regulars and a few people who've been away a while and a few people who've come back from vacation. Lovely to get to sing with all of you and get to meet so many of you. If I haven't met you yet, I'd love to meet you after services, so please don't be shy. Do say hi to me. Back in the day, when I was in acting school, yes, I was in acting school, it was drilled into us that more important than being a good actor was being, quote, coachable. We were told that even if we were the most talented person on the planet, people would not want to hire us if we couldn't take direction. Now, what exactly did they mean by coachable? Well, it always felt a bit patronizing, like we were pets to be trained. The main idea was that we would be able to take feedback and notes from a director without being resistant. That was the opposite of coachable, resistant. Now, there is something mildly dehumanizing about actor training, including the fact that it is actually called training, yet again, like golden retrievers being house trained. We have to be open to direction, and we have to not be resistant, ultimately telling us in some way that we have to submit to the ultimate artist in charge, the director. We have to let down our walls and accept the ways that we are in some ways just a pawn in a bigger vision of the play, even as we're asked to be creative and make our own choices in a scene. Looking back, while I feel glad that I am no longer in that sometimes degrading position of being a professional actor, at its best, there was something almost spiritual about working to break down the walls my ego puts up, to allow myself to collaborate on a project. Sometimes, even when I thought I was being open and coachable, a teacher or director would see right through it, sensing my resistance to letting go of my individual will. In those situations, it was only once I was honest about what was in the way of me receiving the feedback that I could break through the barrier, where suddenly I felt free. I found out it was a lot harder to resist direction all the time and not be honest with myself about my feelings than to just give in to the feedback and the work. In fact, once I let those walls down to coaching, my acting often became more responsive, exciting, and honest. In our American culture, especially as Southerners, many of us, we can have a hard time not just receiving, but giving honest feedback. We are just so dang nice. Speaking for myself, I find that I'm a person who habitually takes notes for myself and accumulates feedback on how I feel things could be improved in the world or in my work. However, when it comes to actually speaking to the appropriate people to give such feedback, I have a hard time getting over the hurdle of how they might feel or react should I do so. Now, often this can be healthy because back when I was less careful about giving notes in my theater days, I learned that people could get really upset with too much or any critical feedback. Now, while this makes sense in our individualistic world that wants everyone to kind of stay in their lane and mind their own business, it can sometimes become part of a societal problem. It's hard to give critique when it feels important because we know people are often not great at receiving it. This loop leaves most people uncomfortable on the giving and the receiving end, as that mutual discomfort and fear reinforces one another, resulting in few people speaking up about things that require critique. Now, one antidote that's been proposed for this vicious circle is the feedback sandwich, sometimes known as the compliment sandwich. You may have heard of it. It was actually introduced in the 1980s by Mary Kay Cosmetics founder Mary Kay Ash, which I didn't know, in her book on management, where she instructs managers to sandwich every bit of criticism between two heavy layers of praise. A manager should be able to tell someone when something is wrong without bruising an ego in the process. Never giving criticism without praise is a strict rule for me, she said. No matter what you are criticizing, you must find something good to say, both before and after. I think it's fair to say that this technique is still common sometimes in the work culture of the U.S. today. I myself have heard it espoused and used in Jewish institutions and summer camps and even in my restaurant work. That was in the theater days. And theoretically, at least, it feels like a great way to be able to make the process of giving criticism less fearful for both the giver and the receiver. However, the author of Radical Candor, named Kim Scott, who works as a coach for some of the biggest companies in America, pushes back against this method. She writes that folks who receive the feedback sandwich often discard the meat, the criticism, and instead focus on the two delicious pieces of artisan bread, the praise. This means that while you did actually deliver the criticism, there's little chance the other person retained it. What this means is while the bread portions are helpful cushions for the discomfort of the critique, for the giver and the receiver, ultimately the goal of the delivery itself, to give critique, is not accomplished, bringing us back to square one and making the whole process for nothing. All this is to say that as a society, we have not been able to crack the nut of how to give and receive feedback. But we are in good company. The ancient rabbis also seemingly acknowledged this difficulty. Come on, paper. Thank you. In a midrash on our parsha, Devarim, Deuteronomy, the rabbis try to get to the heart of the problem of giving negative feedback to a person. Rabbi Tarfon said, "I swear by the temple service that there is not anyone in this generation who is capable of receiving rebuke." Rabbi Akiva said, "I swear by the temple service that there is not anyone in this generation who is capable of giving rebuke." Even before the politeness of Texan Americans came into being, the rabbis of our tradition recognized that the whole process of criticizing our fellow human beings is fraught with difficulty, if not impossibility. And yet, the same midrash interprets the title of our book that we're starting this week, Devarim, which means words, as actually meaning words of rebuke. This is because much of what follows is, in fact, reminding the people of the ways that they haven't done right and warning them against going off track in the future. Even in this, however, rather than the Torah being upfront and clearly stating that Moshe's words are criticism, it too instead veils the truth from the first verse of the book. Rashi, the great commentator, says that this is for the sake of the honor of Israel, to not embarrass the people too greatly. That may not be a feedback sandwich exactly, but it is an attempt to dull the edge of the criticism to come. But even though the first introductory sentence starts off unassumingly, Moshe's actual rebuke of the people is not what you would describe as subtle. In a tie-in to the book of Lamentations, or Eicha, which we will read tomorrow night on Tisha B'Av, in our parsha, Moshe exclaims, "Eicha! How can I carry alone the trouble of you and the burden and the bickering?" Pretty intense. He even goes on to blame the people for things for which he himself, we know, is responsible. Most notably and surprisingly, he pins his own punishment of not entering the promised land, not on his own sin of not following God's instructions by hitting the rock, but actually on the sin of the people doubting God after the scouts make a bad report of the land. Shouting at his inferiors, not taking the blame for his own shortcomings, and placing it on those under him, these traits do not exactly add up to award-winning management material. Perhaps rebuke is as hard to get right for Moshe as it is for us. So on the one hand, we have the example of Mary Kay, who sandwiching with compliments lessens or maybe even eliminates the critique that you're trying to give. On the other hand, we have someone like Moshe, who is, in his own words, holding nothing back in blaming and shaming the people for their past errors. Is there a way to find a middle path? The book of Proverbs, or Mishle, teaches that if you rebuke a fool, they're likely to hate you. But if you rebuke a wise person, they will love you. To make this ideal of giving feedback a reality, however, requires that a culture is created where feedback is welcomed when delivered with sensitivity, but without excessive flattery. It takes two to tango. Before giving feedback, we must make sure a person is open to feedback. But also to do so, we must be prepared to do it properly, straightforwardly, but with sensitivity and with a clear belief that they are able to make a change in behavior. So there's a reason why Rabbi Tarfon and Akiva felt that nobody knows how to give or receive feedback in their day, and even more so maybe in our day. The task is simply difficult. The human sensitivity to the circumstances and personalities involved in the action and caution in jumping to rebuke too much is paramount to it having value for us. But the Torah nonetheless requires us to rebuke. Hocheach tochiach et amitecha. You shall surely reprove your fellow. Now this doesn't mean that we always go around correcting people on every little thing. But when there's a behavior or individuals or a large group of people who need to be corrected, we are commanded to do so. While Moshe's approach may not be the gold standard for most common people, his rebuke for past actions was aimed at a better future for the Israelites in the Promised Land. He could have flattered them, made them feel good, but then he would have had maybe set them up to fail. They would have not have understood the depth of the stakes involved in their communal faithfulness to God's law. He wanted to give them the chance to do better. It is our job to find the ways to give rebuke that walk that tightrope between upfront honesty and sensitivity to each human being made in God's image. As receivers of feedback, we must work on our openness to taking in the information. And when it's delivered with kindness, find ways to act upon it in our lives without holding a grudge. Namely, in the acting vocabulary, we want to be coachable. But we also want to be sensitive and careful coaches who choose wisely when to give advice and how to give it. In many ways, this requires a communal sea change, and maybe even a revolution in how we raise and teach people to be able to take part in the obligation of giving and receiving tochacha, rebuke. It will not happen overnight, and we will likely get our calculations wrong sometimes, but still we are adjured to do so. We must let each other know clearly when we have gone too far, with compassion and kindness in the delivery. On this Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, the day commemorating so much destruction in our history, we are beginning the process of reflection for ourselves and our communities. In what ways did we allow our societies and communities to be destroyed? How were we responsible? When did we speak out or speak up? And when did we back down when the circumstances required us not to? These are not easy questions. But as we make the journey from destruction on Tisha B'Av to our personal and communal rebuilding up to the new year, leading up to the new year, it is on us to reflect on how we can be more open to improvement and how we can show that we care by sensitively offering others the opportunity to grow and improve. And when we do, we may just feel the freedom and creativity that I felt when I finally let my walls down as an actor, took the coaching, and was able to create something honest, innovative, and beautiful. May we all be blessed with that feeling individually and as a community. Shabbat Shalom.